Whether it's primary, secondary, or higher education, choosing the right school or college is a complex decision. What kind of learning environment is best for students, for both boys and girls? Hello and welcome to Crossfire. In the studio, I'm joined by Sakshi Dhingra Khanna, a University of Sheffield student and an entrepreneur. And on my left, I'm joined by Rahul Seth, a BITS Pilani student and works for a startup, ClearTax. Rahul, you believe that students should be able to learn with their own gender. That is your position.
Yes.
Please elaborate. You have a minute to make your point.
So there are a couple of things. The first starts with the gender bias that exists in education already. There's already a bias that moves women towards the so-called humanities, the men towards sciences. There have been multiple studies which have gone on to show that the moment you segregate guys and girls into separate sections, this bias starts to move out. There are multiple studies, one for example by Stetson University in Florida, which measured outcomes on the FSAT, where they tried to see what would be the impact on students if they were in a co-ed environment or in a single-sex environment. And the results were startling. So for example, boys in co-ed schools, they scored 37% proficient on it, while boys themselves in single-sex schools scored 86% proficient on that test. Girls in co-ed schools, 59%, which jumped up to 75%. So funnily, and you think that it's better for women to do so, it's actually much better for guys themselves to do this. And there are statistical studies that prove it. There's also another study which was carried out in Seoul, which carries on the concept of...
I'll bring Sakshi on that. Sakshi, some tough numbers to sort of, argue against.
Whatever numbers that there are to argue, but if you look at the real world situation, if you think of it practically, at the end of the day, a woman has to step out of her college. She has to choose a career of her choice, an institution of her choice. Now, her choice of choosing the institution, whether it's a unisex or it's a single sex, it cannot just depend on these statistics. It's her choice. Plus, if she steps out into an MNC, or if it's the hospitality industry, or if it is the education sector, she has to work with men, right? At the end of the day, she has to interact in groups of men. Like, for example, even like we're engineering students and we've done our lab works in groups. And I think better interaction with men or boys at that time, it actually helps women adjust in a better work environment later on, whatever it may be.
Right. Which is very logical. I mean, today you might be in a single-sex school, whether you're a man or a woman, a girl or a boy, but well, tomorrow you have to step out and you have to start working, right? And in office, in organizations, you wouldn't have this choice. While I want to work in a particular section where I am surrounded by all women or men.
True. One is, this is an ivory tower debate. We are sitting in an air-conditioned room discussing this. We are a populace which isn't really representative of the true demographic of India. We're the top 1%, 2%. It's beautiful to talk about logical realities in an ideal scenario where you expect, over the long term.
This view is very myopic, right?
It's a very myopic view. It's incredible. Like, there's also a certain sense of pseudo-liberalism that goes around where we think, oh, it's a liberal idea and we have to support it. The funny thing is, liberal ideas are not, there's a liberal bias if you look at it. So, if you look at just our statistics itself, 60 to 70% of India is rural India. Where concepts of, as they say, right, when you go out and work in an MNC, when you do it, like the words she chose themselves are very representative of the bias that we hold today. And we don't understand that when you're in, say, a rural scenario. For example, I was talking to my driver on the way here, and I asked him the same question. And he told me, you know what, like, you're educated, you know about it, there are multiple things that you understand, and you're aware of it, so it's wonderful, and you can come out of it. There are so many of these people who are unaware of multiple issues in terms of even safety, if we come to that later. But in terms of safety itself, it's so questionable. And there are hundreds of things which get compromised as a result. And so that's not something you can base it on.
Rahul, yes, we'll come back to you.
Acceptance and quality, these are two things that are very important. And you see only unisex institutes, they actually support that. They encourage that. And any professors, if you talk about professors worldwide across the UK, professors from the University of Cambridge, they've come up with this, that the strongest reason for sending your child to a co-ed is that, there's better mixing between, the girls and the boys. The learning outcomes are better. That is what their research has proven at the University of Cambridge. That was professors have come up with. And acceptance and equality is what are the factors that now everyone needs to know. Even if you're talking about a driver, even if you're talking about any XYZ, not as as capable of we are, but they all want their children to be capable, right? They want them to go into the best universities, institution. I have a driver. He's sending he wants his son to be an engineer. He's sending him to the best university.
Yes.
So his daughter, she wanted to do engineering. Now he came up with me and he's like, okay, what if she wants to go abroad and study? It's a good opportunity. Obviously, you can apply for scholarships. There are various
Right.
options. Then he came up with this question about safety. See, everywhere, whatever institute you go to, you cannot link safety to the type of institute you want to choose.
That's an important point, but
Yeah.
let's get Rahul's rebuttal on the initial points that you made. Segregation, to what extent do you think could be beneficial, if at all?
So it's not that I'm saying segregate society into males living in one island and females living on another island.
Right.
During the confines of when you're undertaking your education as such, at that point of time, learning outcomes are better. When you
Believe
send
at
your
that point
school,
they should be
when you
separated.
send your school, yeah, so when you send your kid to school, and I'm not talking just about learning outcomes, I'm also talking about the bias that exists.
Right.
Women generally, and I can understand that she's an exception to the norm, women are generally pushed into non-math, non-science careers.
Right.
And it's a growing concern. And this is something that was simultaneously done with studies as well. I can pull them up, take a
Right,
lot of time.
absolutely.
It was done with studies as well, where they found out that the percentage of girls who continue to study science and mathematics post grade 8th,
Right.
if they were in single-sex schools,
Right.
versus if they were in co-ed schools, was much higher. The
Right.
same for guys studying humanities and the so-called softer arts, if you think of it.
Right.
That society's norms are also intrinsically imprinted upon you when you're in a co-ed school.
Right.
When you're just talking about education, if you're segregated, and there are benefits that come out of it, and
Right.
I'm not even getting to the concept of
So
distractions
you're
or
saying,
to proof
in other
here.
words, you're saying if you are looking at a single-sex boys' school, it's easier for a boy to perhaps pursue art, music, literature.
There's lesser
The
there's a
gender
lesser push.
stereotype.
No, there's also lesser pressure to appear to be macho because
Right.
you don't have the preening aspect working out there, right?
Right.
And this is where you come on to distractions.
Right.
Distractions, I'm sorry, not
Right.
distraction.
Right.
Distraction.
So he's saying, gist of it is, well, if boys and girls go to the same school, both of them will end up distracting each other, and which will definitely affect the learning.
So you mean to say that whatever, if a girl wants to work in an MNC, that means she
I
should
don't know
think
whether he can
about
focus at work or not. but-
the real world is not a single-sex world. It is
Yes.
a mixture of both boys and girls. If a girl is stepping out, how much can you keep her protected, and can you keep her in an all-girls college or whatever? She has to step out.
yeah.
She has to work. She has to work in an environment where there are boys. She has to interact well. She can't just sit numb, and she can't just talk to girls all the time, right? So that student diversity, that will not be there in an all-girls school or all-boys institution. So
Right.
that is something that can only be promoted by a unisex institution. That's what I feel. And you have to be, I have been from a convent school myself.
Right.
But when it was choosing a university, I always wanted to go into a unisex institution. The reason
Right.
being that I have had experiences from both. But you see, I wanted to be able to interact with guys better because
Right.
obviously I have worked in an MNC before, I've worked in a construction
Yeah.
firm before, and I feel that has really helped me from my personal experience. So I have
Right,
had,
Yeah,
working
absolutely.
with boys.
Rahul, so what's your rebuttal?
When you extrapolate from a particular example and say, hey, it worked out better for me,
Right.
it's not really an argument. It's a
But don't you feel that
an
for the
anecdote.
see, gone are the days when it was just about sort of staring at the books, mugging and examinations, and then clearing another exam, and start working as an engineer or a doctor, depending on what you wanted to be. Now it's about overall development. How are your social skills? How are your interpersonal skills? And don't you believe that kind of segregation? Girls to a particular school and boys to another school will sort of hamper that.
You could say if you're only going to talk about interaction, I think there's enough diversity within women. Like, you can't just say that there are only two types. There are just men and there are just women.
Of course.
There are different types of behaviors within both groups as such.
Of course.
Your social skills, if you're going to say that my social skills are not that great because I didn't interact with the opposite sex,
Right.
is really weak because you did interact with 50% of humanity right there, right? And you did get to learn how to talk with them, social graces, politeness,
But
courtesy,
not with the other
understanding them.
50%.
And I don't really think it's that diverse. And I'm not saying that, again, I said,
Right.
1 o'clock school ends,
He's
you're
not
out.
going to relent. Sakshi, what can you say to convince him?
I don't agree with you because I've had experiences from both fields.
The essential question which she's asking, were schools created for socialization opportunities for youth?
Right.
No, schools were created for education. And if that's got to be your primary
And
purpose.
socializing was a little part of it.
It's something that happens.
Right.
Your concluding remarks, Sakshi, and we're running short of time, so we'll conclude the debate now.
Okay,
Yeah.
I strongly believe that, unisex schools are better for especially for higher education, because it offers student diversity. It helps groom girls better, especially even boys for that matter. Plus, you get a better working, you can adjust, girls can adjust better to the work environment, to the work atmosphere, working with boys. And I feel it gives better results, as it has given me.
Right. Rahul?
Well, as I had said earlier itself,
Yes.
there's gender bias. Women are pushed into studying certain subjects while guys aren't,
Right.
and guys vice versa as well. It's something that gets removed
So,
here.
so let's
It's good.
agree to
It's
disagree.
education.
Let's agree to disagree. And the fact that, well, of course, both single-sex schools and colleges and co-ed schools and colleges have their advantages and disadvantages, and this debate is not going to die down soon. Well, we will wrap up today's debate on that note. Thanks for watching, and until next time, goodbye.
In a hectic day-to-day life, maintaining work-life balance for every parent is a must. Well, that being said, it becomes absolutely necessary for every parent to spend quality time with their child. We're now with Mrs. Shipra Chhabra, who's a counselor herself. Ma'am, thank you so much for talking to us. How can a parent keep a check on the amount of time that they're spending with their child and make sure that they are spending enough quality time with their child?
Well, I think the first indicator would be the child himself. If everybody has busy lifestyles these days, they have work to do, they have home stuff to do. But here, I think you'll agree that across every socio-economic background, spending time with a child, there is no shortcut to that. The difference would present itself in a way that the child's becoming a loner, or he's wanting to do everything by himself. He doesn't want company around eventually. Versus when you see a child whose family spends enough time with them, they do things together, they maybe solve puzzles together or go out together. So here I'm going to differ from a lot of people who would think that maintaining only the house, cleaning the house or cooking would be the most important part. I'm from an opinion where it's fine if you haven't cleaned the house one day. If you've sat down with a child, probably did a puzzle with him, or probably just taken him out to a park or taken him out to a movie,